Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us, joining us live would be Vibhav Mittal, who's an AI and IPR lawyer. He's somebody who's heading the India Risk Chapter for Remas Singapore, an associate fellow at Sarai IIT Madras. He's practicing at India's leading intellectual property firm, handling major disputes, and has been recognized as the rising star by the Managing Intellectual Property in 2022 and 2023. He's somebody who advises on AI data governance and serves as a global expert for international alliances on digital and artificial intelligence law. Vibhav, if you can hear us, a very, very warm welcome to the AI Conclave 2025. And with this, we'd like to leave it up to you to take it forward.
Thank you so much. Can I be heard clearly?
Yes, you can. Over to you.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. And trust me, I tried very hard to be there in person, but unfortunately, my schedule was such that I could not. Right. So I am going to, and actually, the previous talk allowed me to kind of create a segue into this. We spoke about compliance in the previous talk that we just heard. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about AI governance, and that also through the lens of voluntary frameworks. You should be able to see my screen very shortly. Yes. So just give me a second. I think I'll try, in the interest of time, I'm going to try and cover this in about 15 or 17 minutes so that we can take a couple of questions. So we'll get to the introductions later, but simply put, I'm an AI, IP, and AI and IP lawyer. I'm also an ISO 42001 lead implementer. I'm an associate partner at Anand and Anand, and there are these other things that you see on the screen. There are these multiple affiliations that I have that complements my practice at Anand, which is these multiple non-profit affiliations, which also includes Sarai IIT Madras. Now, what I'm going to be talking about today, and this sort of blends in on the compliance perspective, is that I'm talking about governance. I'm talking about the law plus approach to AI, and I'm going to be talking about the developers playbook for responsible AI in India. Why is that playbook? The developers playbook is predominantly an AI governance framework. In the AI governance guidelines that India published day before yesterday, the developers playbook has been recognized as one of the key voluntary frameworks that is relevant for India for achieving responsible AI, to achieve safe, ethical, responsible AI. Right? From that perspective, and we worked on this last year, I'm going to walk you through this. I hope my slide is visible. I'm on the AI governance slide now. Right? So it's all clear? So we'll move to, if you can see the slide on screen. So we're talking about AI governance. AI governance, and I'd like to sort of
Vibhav, we can see your screen. Sorry, apologies, we couldn't reply. We can see it clearly. Thank you.
Clearly. Perfect. Thank you. So I just want to take the word compliance and sort of bring it to the AI space and connect it to a larger concept, which I really want to set the context before we understand the developers playbook framework. Governance is a system of laws, policies, frameworks, practices that are operating at an international, national, and organizational level. So if there's anything from this slide that I want you to take away, is the fact that governance is law plus. It could cover policies, frameworks, and practices. Governance is also contextual. It could be at international level, national level, and organizational level. Right? Most of my work is predominantly at an organizational level. Then governance applies across different type of actors in this space. Right, so the governance will apply to stakeholders that are developing AI technology, that are deploying AI technology, or using AI technology. Right, and of course you're helping implement, manage, oversee, or regulate. The third bullet is really about, just in one line, it is all about risk identification and mitigation. Right? So it's about managing associated risks and how they align with stakeholder objectives so that you use it responsibly, ethically, slightly different terms, but let's stick to responsibly, and complies with applicable legal and regulatory requirements. Now the point being, please understand as governance it being international, national, organizational, different actors, development, deployment, and use, management of risk, and law is a part of AI governance, particularly because India does not have an AI law. India may or may not have an AI law in the future. We have some laws that cover it, but a governance is law plus. Now, the reason I've put in this framing of governance for you is because when we released the developers playbook last year in November, there's an international association of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. Subsequent to the publication, they made that a recommended resource on their own international platforms. And this is the way IATP defines governance. So, sort of to bring in that symmetry between what we covered in the playbook and how it is fitting in the governance framework is why I have this slide on screen. Moving forward, just a couple of examples. Why is governance law plus? Because if you see the last three, privacy regulations, intellectual property, and AI output violating someone's rights, those our audience in the room could probably feel that it's legal. But there will be certain questions that law may not alone answer, and you may need help. For example, who decides which data is to be included in the training data set of an AI model? That's very much a machine learning engineer, data scientist question. How can the model be tested for bias? Bias assessment itself is a combination of a technical concept or which requires engineers. How is model performing? That means that you're looking at an evaluation framework. Again, you need things beyond law. So the point of this slide is only to communicate that when we are talking about AI governance, law plays a part, but we also have to think of the plus component moving forward. Just a foundation. Governance is about sort of going on the ground and acting on the ground, right? I do want to emphasize that one of the starting points of when we're thinking of governance in India are the responsible AI principles. Of course, these principles are, in one sense, high level. Perhaps the question is how will they get implemented in practical terms, and that's where the playbook comes in, which I'll come to. But the reason I highlight these principles for you is because don't look at these principles as principles voluntary or guiding. We have to look at these principles in terms of attributes that that a consumer may expect from an AI product. Safety and reliability, equality, non-discrimination, principle of privacy and security, right? So you're maintaining the privacy and security. Transparency. And transparency in the responsible AI principles sort of is spoken about in the context of design and functioning of AI system being recorded and made available for external scrutiny and audit. So principle of transparency has been brought in and conceptualized as recording system design and opening up systems for external audits, which is what third-party independent auditing is. And interestingly enough, the AI governance report that was published day before, in its recommendation of transparency, also kind of reiterates this principle of transparency that you see on screen as being coming as a recommendation of voluntary frameworks for independent audits, which is something I'm also doing separately, but we'll come to that in a bit. But see, these are the features. Then we have the principle of accountability. Principle of accountability is again not getting into too much detail, but let's look at the last one. Creating mechanisms of grievance redressal in case of adverse impact. As someone working in this space, I would put grievance redressal in case of adverse impact, I would put all current laws that are applying to AI in India under this head. Intellectual property laws, information technology laws, consumer protection laws. And if you're talking about principle of privacy and security, I would put in the data protection law within that domain. But look at the term that look at the way principle of accountability is framed, and let's go back to what we spoke about governance just a couple of minutes back. All stakeholders, again, this is targeted to stakeholders, governance is targeted to stakeholders, involved in design, development, and deployment of an AI system. There was development, deployment, and use. This is design, development, and deployment. Similar sort of life cycle of the AI system. And stakeholders should conduct risk and impact assessments. Again, the focus on risk identification and mitigation. Right? Moving forward from there, this sort of sets up the context of where responsible AI governance. What is AI governance? How responsible AI meets AI governance at a conceptual level. And on the screen, and of course throughout my slides, you would find some QR codes. If you scan them, you'll find those things on your screen. But this, and in the interest of time, I'll be very quick. This is actually an empirical study published in Harvard Business Review They reviewed 3,000 respondents for a financial pension based app. They took principles of responsible AI and they identified privacy, understandability, and auditability as key attributes when the financial pension paying app, which had AI in it, focused on audit, which is recording system design from the start of the life cycle, looked at privacy, and looked at understandability as in communicating the decision of the AI tool to its intended user. The adoption of the AI tool by itself, and these were responsible AI principles, the adoption of the tool went up 60%. So if we look at this study demonstrates empirically why responsible AI and integrating responsible AI principles, which eventually means adopting AI governance, can benefit your business. Right? And of course, we've spoken about this. When we look at AI governance, we do look at certain current laws do map to AI governance, IP laws, deepfakes, data protection laws, consumer protection laws, and then we've had these series of personality rights cases, like we did the Anil Kapoor. I was part of the Anil Kapoor case at that point of time. My firm's been part of Aishwarya Rai. Even Nagarjuna was the one that I'd done. So the point is, this is just to highlight the point about how current laws are being used in AI and personality rights is one domain that works here. And but moving on, what is the main issue? And we're now coming straight to the playbook, and I'm going to screen share that also. We have 14 minutes with us, so we'll get enough time for questions as well. The fundamental problem, now that we know this conceptual aspect about the responsible AI principles and responsible AI principles and AI governance, the most obvious answer is what is the lack of stakeholder consensus around steps to be taken for responsible AI. That was really the issue. This is an issue that we framed early last year. NASSCOM had reached out to me, and I kind of roped in the firm, and we this was the mandate given to me as an external expert where I co-drafted this framework. We were told to formulate a responsible AI checklist. They wanted it to be a self-evaluation of AI use cases on various aspects of RAI, such as bias, privacy, security. The focus was stated to be on startups. It was because we're talking about, and the playbook was intended for developers, which means technical people in an organization. If you look at it from a governance risk compliance lens, that's almost like the first layer, not the first layer, the first line of defense, right? And so we're talking about non-legal language to be used as the audience was technical because we're addressing developers. Perspective was AI developer, not an exhaustive set of prescriptions. Actionable steps must be there. And NASSCOM was to bring in sort of their technical expertise and experts, and we were bringing in our AI expertise. I'm not getting into how we reach the playbook. Reviewed over lots and lots of things. The bibliography of the playbook contains that. But that sort of led us to the developers playbook in a 10th-month project. And on the right that you see is the next step of the playbook, something that's also there before that I come back to this slide. This is just to contextualize sort of the playbook, right? So the governance guidelines cites in Annexure 5, when you're talking about an organizational level, they are guidelines on safe, responsible, ethical AI use in form of non-binding principles, and the government has cited the playbook. And of course, on the right, which you see also the previous slide, is the fact that the next step of the playbook would be perhaps audits. I've been working in that space with the US nonprofit with Ryan for the last 4.5 years, and I'm currently in the process of training and sort of working on an AI audit scheme that on the data protection law. It's completely voluntary, of course. But our focus today is not on what you see on the right side of my slide, on the left, which is the developers playbook for responsible AI in India. And I'm going to just now stop share and I'm just going to open up the playbook. We have 11 minutes. Thank you for to do this virtually. Let me just screen share the playbook. I'll take you through a couple of prompts and then we can open this up for discussion. So there'll be sufficient time. Right. There we go. I think this should be visible. Yeah, I can see it's visible. So this is the developers playbook for responsible AI. It was published last year in November 2024 for responsible AI in India. We've of course had reviewed it by multiple experts. I think Abhishek Singh included a line there. Yeah. So this was in the context. This is Abhishek Singh's preface, which speaks about the fact that this is aligned with India AI's mission of safe and trusted AI pillar. The playbook seeks to harmonize the public and private sector risk mitigation frameworks, offering a path that integrates ethics into the fabric of development. And this is a proactive commitment that not only prepares the industry for evolving regulation, but also positions India as a leader on the global stage for ethical and responsible AI development. Moving forward, if we understand, so this, I'm not taking you through certain specific parts of the playbook so that we understand what it is. And of course, I'm available on LinkedIn and you can share my details, and I'm happy to have a conversation anytime in addition to the conversation here. The playbook is designed to provide a voluntary framework for developers. Again, to remind, developers means people in an organization that have technical skill that are building these tools, the first line of defense in a GRC context. Framework for developers to systematically identify and mitigate potential risks associated with commercial development, deployment, and use of AI in India. The risk mitigation guides in the playbook contain consolidated AI risk libraries with corresponding sets of risk mitigation prompts. And we've evaluated everything from hard law, soft law, and the references section contains everything, right? Now, the key page in the playbook, and this is in definitions, which I'm not going to bore you with. This is where the playbook rests. We've divided the playbook into 3 AI types, right? And this is critical to understand that they, on a one sense, they almost represent the way AI also evolved, right? So we, because this is intended for a technical audience, and well, now for everyone rather, but it was going to be primarily led by an Indian technical audience, we've divided it into a discriminative AI model, generative AI model, and AI application. Discriminative AI model, where AI model is detecting patterns from data. Take all your healthcare applications for diagnosis. You've been scanned. The training data set contains multiple data sets, data points where you've been trained on different types of X-rays and you're able to detect lung cancer, or you've been trained on images of eyes and you're able to detect an eye disease, or you've been so that's discriminative AI model. Generative AI model, we all of us understand. I think that's AI became popular in November 22 in that sense, which is generative AI and Chat GPT and all of those aspects. And then we have AI application. AI application is where it is built. AI application is built on top of a descriptive AI model or a generative AI model, and there's this aspect where India is sometimes considered to be the app layer of the globe in that sense. Now, the second important aspect that the playbook does, and this kind of really ties back to what was being spoken in just the previous talk, where we spoke about the fact the speaker spoke about unit tests are more important than an end semester, right? So, or end exam. We conceptualize an AI life cycle from a governance standpoint, right? And so if one, so rather than getting into a technical way of defining the life cycle, we conceptualize the AI life cycle for the first time in a very simplified way. Conception, collection, processing, and usage of data, design, development, and testing, deployment, monitoring, and maintenance. So you have to see the playbook operating in 12 silos. Descriptive AI model across the 4 stages, conception to deployment. Generative AI model from conception to deployment. AI application from conception to deployment, right? That's how it operates. And let's take a few examples, right? And I'm going to go to the app layer piece of it, right? Rather than, because now let's so stage 1. For example, stage 1 conception. We're talking about risk mitigation prompts, and let's take up issue of responsible AI hypothetically, bias. Now everyone talks about bias is important. How do we mitigate it? If we see the first 2 prompts, or the first 3 mitigation prompts on your screen that you see there, right? Define and document intended purpose or use of the application you're conceiving for development. Then it brings in identify and describe the stakeholders who are intending to use the application and who are likely to be directly impacted, and describe the geographic area where the application is intended to be deployed to ensure it is responsive to geographical considerations of language, culture, laws, and regulations. If you look at the geographic area prompt, right? This, we were drafting this about, I think, 14 months or 15 months back, July last year or June last year. You would see that one of the reasons why we are talking about foundation models being developed in India, or some of these models not having a particular context, right? About India's context, right? Here's a prompt here indicated for you, that how are you, if you're building something, an AI tool, who are you building it for? And if you are sensible enough to describe the geographic area, or at least at a conceptual level, understand for who you're building it for, taking into consideration geographical considerations, maybe it may help in bias mitigation. Maybe it will be a aspect. And then for that, we've also provided guidance at IIT Madras, and I think the India AI Summit. There's a pre-summit event in IIT Madras just last month, exactly a month back actually, 7th October, and we moderated a panel on the concept of participatory AI, which is the further guidance that you see there is an actual concept of participatory AI, where when I'm building an AI tool, I tend to take user feedback in building the tool so that it's contextual and relevant for the way it's being brought. And you have to think of this as risk mitigation measures. You have to think of this as no laws covering this. Let's look at a second prompt, and I'll take one more and then we can move to questions. Describe the data requirements. Now, everyone talks about data as personal data and DPDPA covering AI. Sure, DPDPA may cover AI, but data, you have personal data, you have non-personal data. You have data where, when in non-personal data, you would have copyright protected data, and you may have non-personal data that is not IPR protected. And then, of course, when you're talking about data requirements, when you talk about quality, quantity, and format, let's speak to an engineer when they talk about the design stage, and when they go to the design stage of an AI model, whether you're fine tuning on top of generative AI and bringing your own organization's data and fine tuning on top and building on top of a generative AI model, even there the data that you bring in is at the pre-training stage. The quality, quantity, and format of the data is critical for a machine learning engineer, right? Because they need to make sure that the data is solid, is accurate enough, or is in a form that can be used to train an AI model, right? And so the second aspect we're talking about is describing data requirements. This is the stage of conception. Let's move forward to stage two. And of course, we're talking about ensuring clarity of human oversight. Let's go to stage two, collection and processing and usage of data. Now, here, at that point of time, we've sort of looked at the intersection of AI and personal data, AI and DPDPA, in the most nuanced way that we do. And the audit framework that I was talking about, independent audit of AI systems, is taking this aspect and the entire concept of AI lifecycle that you see in the playbook in a far more granular way in terms of setting up a binary audit criteria. Right? That's really the next step. But coming back to the playbook, here are these prompts like consult appropriate experts whether your data qualifies as publicly available. If it's publicly available, the law may not apply. Consent is one way, but legitimate use, if it qualifies as legitimate use, you don't need consent in the law. So we have these prompts for legitimate use, then we have a consent, then we have so now let's go to some interesting ones in data. We know there is a right of erasure, right? Or withdrawal of consent. Now we've included, and we're connecting this back to the point of audits again, because audits is also another recommendation in the governance guidelines, right? You've taken personal data, it's gone in the model, now it's in the black box, or I don't know, technically wherever it is, technical people can address that better. But it is a possibility that once the personal data has gone into an AI system, it may not be called back, right? And it may be technically infeasible to withdraw that personal data, which is why we have this prompt that if it is technically infeasible to do so, if you've got a request for withdrawal of consent, if it is technically infeasible to do so, register your constraints for internal risk assessment or external audits. It's so the entire playbook. We have about 2 minutes and we started 6 minutes late, so we've total of 8 minutes right now. But just to simplify this, the playbook is giving us a manner of risk mitigation as we are developing these tools, right? And I've taken you through a couple of prompts from the conception stage to the processing stage. Then we have in stage three, we could probably look at designing development, looking at the checks and safeguards, and then the fourth is on monitoring the tool. So that's the deployment, monitoring, and maintenance. And just as a final point, when we look at this sort of the playbook, we are conceptualizing this this is a starting point. It's been recognized by the government as a relevant starting point from a responsible AI lens. Another way of doing this is to look at it from an ISO 42001 perspective, which is about integrating AI systems in your organization. And a final step could be to indicate this in terms of an audit if you want to get into the pre-audit audit space. So that's in the interest of time. I'm going to stop here. I think maybe we have 3-4 minutes, 5 minutes for questions. I'm happy to engage.
So we have a minute plus. Thank you so much, Vibhav. I hope you can hear the applause. We wish we could have done a virtual applause as well as a symbol for you, but I'm sure the audio is there for that. So Vibhav, we're just going to be asking maybe if there is any question, we'll encourage one of it. Do we have any audience question to Vibhav? Can we quickly give the microphone to the gentleman at the back? Vibhav, we'll just be able to entertain one question if that's okay because of the time constraint.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. So to the gentleman at the back, request you to keep the question concise and of course please tell your name as well.
Sir, Abraham Fernandez from Arna Law. Just wanted to ask you, what do you think are the international efforts towards harmonizing AI governance or globalization of governance? Since it's fairly new and steps are being taken by multiple nations introducing regulation, where do we see this going in the future globally?
See, governance is going to be law plus first. Second, governance is going to be international, national, or organizational. The way the playbook operates is in an organizational context. So it's very difficult unless and until there's an international treaty that identifies governance measures that are acceptable internationally. It'll be difficult to identify that, but I would say that the responsible AI principles, fairness, transparency, bias, protecting privacy, these are these common ingredients that you can find across global landscapes. It is the implementation and operationalization of that which will vary country to country, and frankly speaking, the way AI plays out, it's probably better that it operates in that manner, with certain diversity and cultural context coming in as you apply these broad principles.
Sure, thank you.
We appreciate Vaibhav.
So Vibhav.
Vaibhav Mittal, you are a very powerful, very researched presentation. So next time you have to come to physically for our program. And we'll, because very good knowledge, and I appreciate your interest, and we have become now closer. Thank you very much. Give a big hand, clap.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vibhav, for joining us, and thank you for your valuable time. Ladies and gentlemen, on the other side, as Vibhav is online, and we're just going to be now going to our live stage. So thank you, Vibhav, for joining and giving us your valuable time.